The things that I have to share with you this morning are some of the most important things that I could ever share. It's how to make your dreams come true. I'd like to share with you, first of all, a story that's told by Glenn Clark in his book, I Will Lift Up Mine Eyes, in which he tells how the dream of a mother came true. One day, this mother called him, and she said that her son had infantile paralysis, and would he pray for her? 2 weeks later, the woman called again, and this time there was desperation in her voice, anguish. And she said, 6 doctors have held a consultation and have given my boy no hope to live. He's been paralyzed from the neck down for a week. His back has been punctured 11 times. He has a temperature of 105 degrees and has been having 2 convulsions a minute for the past 4 hours. Is there anything I can do? And Glenn Clark told her to pray. Well, how shall I pray? And he explained to her a way of praying that she'd never heard of. Pray not by asking, he said, but by giving. As you ask, you shall receive. But as you give, you also shall receive. And the process in giving at a crisis like this will open your soul more completely than the process of asking. As the tides go out, they will come back. As you give wholly, wholeness will come to you and to those that belong to you. But to give wholly is harder than it may seem. It means that you must give your boy completely and utterly to God. Let God take him into heaven if that is his will. Let him take him and keep him forever if that is the plan. But I want my boy, the mother cried in anguish. And Glenn Clark went on to say to her, if your son were to become a senator of the United States, would you object to his going to Washington? Would you want him to lose the opportunity of fulfilling his great destiny that God has planned for him, just in order to keep him living in your neighborhood so that you could have the luxury of seeing him whenever you wished? And then he reminded her that heaven is a far more wonderful place than Washington, and to sit at God's right hand a far higher honor than to sit at the right hand of the President of the United States. And he went on to say, you don't know what your boy's life on earth might be, what suffering and sorrow he might be escaping by going to heaven at this time, if it is God's will. And he said, don't let your devotion to your boy become mere attachment. Don't let your mother love become smother love. Go to your room and kneel down and give your boy to the Father to keep or give back, according to the best plan for the boy. A little after that, the telephone rang again, and a cheery voice said, I have given my boy to the Father. I'm ready to accept with radiant acquiescence whatever he wills to do for my son. Within 2 months, this boy was perfectly well and back in school without even a limp to show that he'd been sick. Now, I'd caution you right now not to think of this story as being a description of a way to get God to answer prayers, in this case, restoring the boy, because God could have taken the child. There's too many times when we will earnestly pray that God will keep somebody alive, and we should never have prayed that prayer. I've been as guilty of this as others. I've been by the bedside of a woman that we earnestly prayed God to spare her life, and she spent the next 3 years as a vegetable. And we should have prayed the other prayer, to relinquish, to give away her life, that God might take her if the time was right, or that he might restore her in health if that was his will. So don't make the mistake of thinking from this story that this is a way to get God to heal somebody. That's not the principle that we want to illustrate. But the story of what happened to this mother is the story of how to make your dreams come true. Now let's see what happened. First of all, the mother started off with selfish reasons for wanting the child to live. She was thinking in terms of her feelings, her suffering, her anguish, her grief over his loss. But then she came to realize that those were selfish reasons, and she really wasn't thinking about her son and what was best for him. And so she allowed that dream to become converted or transformed. And she began to dream that what she wanted was that which was best for the child. Her dream became pure, and it became a soul's sincere desire. And then she did the thing that is so very difficult to do in prayer, and yet is one of the basic laws of prayer, and that is she relinquished her prayer to God and radiant acquiescence. Radiant acquiescence means to joyously agree without argument. And what she was doing was she was giving her child to God, and she was joyously agreeing with God without argument that whatever his will would be for that child, at this point, that will be done. And it turned out that God's will for her son was wholeness in this life rather than wholeness in heaven. And so the child was restored. But his restoration to her was a bonus. She would still have had joy either way, because she would have had joy in God's will for her child being done. Her dream would have come true either way, because it had been transformed. And using that story as an illustration, let's begin to examine more closely how to make your dreams come true. Because all of the elements that are necessary for your dreams to come true are in that story. There are three things: know yourself, control yourself, and deny yourself. The three rules for how to make your dreams come true: know yourself, control yourself, deny yourself. First of all, let's look at the characteristics of a dream that fulfills the definition of a soul's sincere desire. A dream which is a soul's sincere desire is always fulfilled. It comes from God. A soul's sincere desire might be such a thing as a dream house that you've always wanted. That could be a soul's sincere desire. A soul's sincere desire might be in terms of a place you'd like to go and live. It may be in terms of how your children or your grandchildren turn out. It might be in terms of plans for your own future. They can all be soul's sincere desires. A soul's sincere desire is one that comes from God. And we need to remember, when we think about this, that God's desire for us is not stinginess, it is not poverty, it isn't sickness, it isn't doing without. Because how many times did Jesus in different ways explain to people about God's loving care for us and what God wants for us? I'm going to close with the illustration of Solomon and how Solomon latched on to the secrets of making dreams come true. But Jesus was talking one day, and he says, you know what God did to Solomon? That he made Solomon the greatest king of his time, and the greatest king of all of the Hebrew kings. And he gave him wealth, in stature, long life. And he says, look at these lilies that are growing out here in the field. Even Solomon in all of his glory was not arrayed like one of these. Flowers that are alive today, tomorrow they die, they're picked up, they're burned. Now if God, he says, so clothes the grass of the field that today is and tomorrow is not, how much more will he clothe you, because you are so much more valuable than they? Again and again and again he brings this point out. So we need to get it on our minds right now that the will of God for us is good, and that God's desire for us is to give us good things. And furthermore, because God made us, the normal desires that we feel inside of seeking and craving for good things are desires that are put there by God. They're desires that arise out of the things that God has intended for us to have. Provided, of course, that to have them won't hurt someone else. An example of that is the fact that God has established or ordained that each one of us have a mate. But for us to desire somebody else's mate is a wrong desire. And that is not a soul's sincere desire, because it'll hurt someone. A soul's sincere desire is a qualified and controlled desire. It has safeguards in it that keep us guarded and safe from evil, and that keep us from doing wrong. Because the soul's sincere desire acknowledges, it admits its relationship to God. And it's to have that soul's sincere desire fulfilled will contribute to the mutual welfare of all. Again, we could take an example that you've got a dream house you've always wanted. If you were to have that dream house, think of the people involved in you getting that house, who would benefit by the fact that they had a part in you getting that house. You see, it's a good thing for God to grant you a desire like that. It contributes to the mutual welfare of all. And by its nature, a soul's sincere desire fits in with Paul's list of fruits of the Spirit. In other words, your soul's sincere desire has in its nature things which do not go against love, or joy, or peace, or long-suffering, or gentleness, or goodness, or faith, or meekness, or temperance. A soul's sincere desire can fit into that list as a good thing. A soul's sincere desire acknowledges God's greatest commandment, to love your neighbor as yourself. That whatever you would do, whatsoever ye would that men should do to you, do ye even so to them. Now these are things that give a list of qualifications of a soul's sincere desire. It meets these kind of conditions. Now, how do we go about discovering what our soul's sincere desires are? How do we go about getting them shaped up and surrendered to God? There are three things. Know yourself, control yourself, and deny yourself. Well, the first thing to do is to make out a list. It would be like you'd get home today and you'd sit down by yourself and you'd start making out a list of what your soul's sincere desires are. As near as you can tell, what are the things you really, really want? Now, the reason for making a list is because you get these down in front of you in black and white, and you'll have the opportunity then to look at these to see how you feel about them later. Because it's not easy to come up with a list of soul's sincere desires. We'll discover there's a lot of things we think we want, but as we get a chance to look at those, we discover we really didn't want those things. So we need to make the list to help us discover really and truly what our soul's sincere desires are. And in doing this, we can also lift each one up and pray the increase-decrease prayer. That's simply to say, God, if this thing that I have written down is a soul's sincere desire, increase my desire. But if this isn't part of my soul's sincere desires, if this really isn't something that I want, then decrease my desire for it. Because it takes a lot of prayer and thought to get this list accurate. Now, once you've made the list, then you begin to apply the know thyself test to it. The test for sincerity. Does it come from an integrated personality? Now, what that means is, first of all, is it something that you really, really want? Or does it come out of jealousy? Does it come because you want to keep up with the Joneses? Is it an artificially created desire, such as advertisers try to create? If you're in the advertising business, you realize that one of the things you have to do, if you're given a product that nobody particularly is going to want, then you've got to create a desire for having that product. And this is happening all over, so we've got to find out, is this a created desire, or is it really a sincere desire? You've got to know yourself, know what you really want deep down inside. Is it the desire that comes from daydreaming or wish thinking? And is it a desire that I'm willing to pay the cost to have? An example of that still goes back to the matter of husband and wife. You can say, all right, my desire is that I'm going to have a wife. But am I willing to pay the cost in terms of responsibility that goes with being a husband and a father? Am I willing to do what's required to be a husband and a father? And you know, a lot of people have never stopped to ask that question, and they go ahead and get married and they discover they don't want the responsibility and they're unwilling to accept it. You can't do that. A soul's sincere desire has got to meet that test. Am I willing to pay the cost to have it? You've got to know yourself. Then once you've done that, you have to subject these to the second test of control thyself. Does it come from a personality that's integrated with God and man? Does it go against the welfare of others? For example, if I'm after a promotion in a job, and I start praying, God, promote me instead of him, I could very well be going against the welfare of others. To begin with, it might not even be the job that would satisfy me. Secondly, the other man may very well be the man that should have the job. And if I get it, and he doesn't, and he should have had it, look how many lives are going to be affected by my bad desire. So I've got to be sure that my desire and the way I express it does not go against the welfare of others. And I must also be sure that it does not destroy the safeguards of society. These are simply our moral laws. Is a thing immoral that I'm asking for? Does it go against the morals of my society? Does it go against the laws of God? Then I need to ask the question, is it a mature desire, or does it possibly arise out of anger, self-centeredness, clamoring, little baby pouting prayers? In other words, is it a soul's sincere desire? Know thyself, control thyself. Now, the third part is to pray for maturity of desire. And this is called deny thyself. Are you willing to give it away? After you've determined what your real soul sincere desire is, are you willing to give it away? See, God is not an errand boy. Soul sincere desires are desires that are within the will of God, that God has told us to ask for. But once we've asked for them, are we willing to give them up? You see, that's where the illustration of the mother comes in, because at first, her prayer, her soul's sincere desire, was centered for her boy, was centered around what she wanted and not what was good for the boy. That was transformed, and her desire became she wanted what was best for the boy. Then she had to give the whole thing to God and to relax and trust Him to do that which was best, to do it in His time and in His way and by whatever methods He chose. All right. This shows us how to do the thing, and this is much more difficult than the other parts of determining our soul's sincere desires, is the relinquishing of them, to give them away. It's the final and the most difficult law of prayer. We give the whole thing over to God. And you see, the mother did it. And because she was able to do it, do you realize what might have happened if she'd not been able to relinquish that prayer? God might not have been able then to heal the boy because she would have blocked his healing. And it could, because of his condition, it could have happened that that boy would have spent the rest of his life paralyzed in a respirator. And that's what we do with ourselves when we are not able to relinquish our soul's sincere desires to God. We put such restrictions on God that He cannot answer them. He cannot do what is best. But this mother was able to do it, to just say, okay, God, it's all yours. You do what you know is best. And God was freed to do it. It's hard to give the possession of what we want to God and to give the process of achieving that possession to God. Now, process of achieving means that we give God the right to use any means, any avenue, any agency that He wants to bring about our dreams and to do it in His own way and in His own time. We're very impatient. It's very hard for us to leave things alone and to trust God to take care of them. That's one of the hard things about a prayer for relinquishment, is to leave it there. It's like a little boy takes seeds out and he plants them in the ground, and he just can't wait to see if they're growing, so he digs them up. And in the process of digging them up, he destroys them. We have to leave the seeds in the ground. And Jesus said in John 12, verse 24, except a corn of wheat fall into the ground and die, it abideth alone. But if it die, it bringeth forth much fruit. And so we have to put these things in the ground and leave them. And not go poking in the ground to see if they're growing, but to leave them and to wait for God to do his will in his good time. Thomas A. Edison's wife, in talking to Glenn Clark, said that Thomas Edison's methods were just like this. She said he is always perfectly natural and always perfectly relaxed. He feels that all his discoveries have come through him, that he is but a channel for forces greater than himself. The secret of Thomas A. Edison's creativity, he relaxed and he let it come. Relinquishment is a very hard thing, but it has to be done. And we leave it there. So to make your dreams come true, you must know yourself, control yourself, and then deny yourself as you relinquish your whole soul's sincere desire to God. And when you've accomplished that, your desires are answered. They have to be purified, but they are always answered. Now, I referred to Solomon. Solomon was given the kingdom, even though there was a brother, Adonijah, who was older than him. And you can imagine the thoughts that might have gone through Solomon's head, knowing that he had now been made the king. And he knew something of the glory of kingdom because already his father had built this magnificent castle that they lived in. There was wealth, untold wealth. Jerusalem sat on the crossroads of the world at that time with all kinds of caravans going through, so that money and riches and everything was flowing into Jerusalem. Jerusalem was in kind of a strategic place in relationship to other countries around. It was in between Egypt and Syria and Damascus, all of those major places. So it was in a strategic location. Whoever was king would have a lot of pull and a lot of power. And here's Solomon. He could have asked that God would destroy all of his enemies, establish him as the greatest king that ever lived, with riches and glory beyond measure. Now, those might have been his surface dreams, but they weren't his soul's sincere desires. And those dreams became purified in Solomon's mind until he realized that there was only one way that he would ever be able to be a truly great king. And that is if he had the wisdom to rule wisely. And one night as he had been worshiping and praying, God came to him in a dream. And God said, "Ask what I shall give thee." And Solomon said, "Thou hast showed thy servant David, my father, great mercy, according as he walked before thee in truth and in righteousness and in uprightness of heart with thee. And thou hast kept for him this great kindness, that thou hast given him a son to sit on his throne, as it is this day. And now, O Lord my God, thou hast made thy servant king instead of David my father. And I am but a little child. I know not how to go out or come in. And thy servant is in the midst of thy people which thou hast chosen, a great people that cannot be numbered nor counted for multitude. Give therefore thy servant an understanding heart to judge thy people, that I may discern between good and bad. For who is able to judge this thy so great a people? out of all the things he could have asked for. His dream had become purified, and his soul's sincere desire was to have the wisdom to rule well, to rule wisely. Now, he could have asked for wealth. He could have asked for all these other things. But he didn't. He got down to the very heart of the matter. To be a great king, one must have wisdom and compassion. And the speech pleased the Lord, that Solomon had asked this thing. And God said unto him, Because thou hast asked this thing, and hast not asked for thyself long life, neither hast asked riches for thyself, nor hast asked the life of thine enemies, but hast asked for thyself understanding to discern judgment, behold, I have done according to thy words. Lo, I have given thee a wise and an understanding heart, so that there was none like thee before thee, neither after thee shall any arise like unto thee. And I have also given thee that which thou hast not asked, both riches and honor, so that there shall not be any among the kings like unto thee all thy days. And if thou wilt walk in my ways to keep my statutes and my commandments, as thy father David did walk, then I will lengthen thy days. Solomon took the time to know himself, to control himself, and to deny himself. And he came before God with a soul's sincere desire that admit the tests. And because he did, God granted his desire, but even more, gave him all the other things as well. How do you make your dreams come true? You know yourself. You control yourself, and you deny yourself. You make sure that your prayers, that your dreams are your soul's sincere desires, that they meet every test, and then you give them to God. And you give them to God with the assurance and the knowledge that every soul's sincere desire is according to his will, because he put those desires in your heart. And you're praying and asking simply for the things that are already his good pleasure to give you. And those prayers are always, always answered. Let us pray. Our gracious Heavenly Father, help us to begin applying these rules for praying prayers that are soul's sincere desires. Help us to see, to discover what we really, really want. And then to give it completely to you.